This isn't technically my rebuttal time, but I do want to say something about the origin of life, because Bill is more confident than many are that the origin of life will be explained scientifically. For example, Antonio Lascano is not confident. Well, who is he? He's only the president of the International Society for the Study of the Origin of Life. The International Society for the Study of the Origin of Life. Antonio Lascano said this: one feature of life, though, remains certain. Life could not have evolved without a genetic mechanism, one able to store, replicate, and transmit to its progeny information that can change with time. Precisely how the first genetic machinery evolved also persists as an unsolved issue. The exact pathway for life's origin may never be known. Imagine if you're making your living, someone's paying you some research grant to discover the origin of life, and you can't have said, we'll probably never know that. And this is after many, many years of studying it. He's the president of the Society for the Study of the Origin of Life. He doesn't think they're going to ever know. He said at least probably. You know, of course, it's very possible, he thinks, but he said it may never be known. So it's easy for me as a non-specialist, or Bill as a non-specialist in these fields, to say, well, I have every confidence that they will someday figure this out. But the guys who are actually working on it don't have that confidence. And the reason is because they need to have, in order to have life, something that reproduces itself. Rocks don't do that. And until you have plants and animals, all you have is minerals and gases. And they don't do that. And so that's the problem that the origin of life studies have run up against from the beginning. Yes, they do hope to explain why. They have to. If they can't find a natural mechanism to create life, then they have to believe the origin of life must be supernatural. And that is against their worldview. That's the one thing that cannot be allowed. And so they have to say, well, we're still working on this thing. And they say, well, we may never find it, but we're still dedicated to finding a natural source of life. Why? Because that's all we're going to allow to exist. We're not going to allow the possibility of something outside nature to exist. Well, too bad. Come off your own feet if you want to. Why be so close-minded? You see, as a theist, I am simply not that prejudiced. I am simply an open-minded person. I really am. Most religious people are not viewed as open-minded. I would agree, most religious people probably are not very open-minded. I'm not extremely religious. The one thing I am is open-minded. And that's why I'm willing to consider, if evolution proves to be true, then I will consider that evolution happened. That doesn't mean that I'd have to say that God was absent from it, or that God wasn't involved. I can allow that evolution happens. I'm open-minded. I don't think that evolution of the grand scale sort of did happen. I don't think the fossil record will confirm that. And I don't think anything will confirm that, certainly. But,
Done.
Okay.
Do you have a response to that?
Well, it sounded to me like the quote you gave, the person was saying, we may not know the actual exact mechanism where it came about, but we can come up with about a half dozen mechanisms where it might have come about. So yeah, fair enough. We don't have the historical record to be able to know which of these many possible mechanisms was the one that led to self-replicating molecules. But from what I understand from the folks working in this field, they're pretty confident they're going to be able to come up with some, they have a sense of what the mechanisms are. And as I said, mark my words, I bet in your lifetime, they will synthesize these processes in the laboratory. They will actually go convert inorganic molecules into self-replicating molecules.
Steve, do you have 1 minute to ask a little question?
Okay, Bill, if in fact that happens, if through immense years of the most intelligent minds in science, sort of backward engineering from what they know about life to something that they can put together artificially and make life, if that does happen, which is not, would that prove that this happened in nature? Or would that simply prove that it takes intelligent design to make that happen?
Okay. Here's what they're up to, it seems to me. Let's recreate the conditions of Earth and recreate the kind of compounds that were there, recreate the same kinds of energy sources that were there, and see what happens. Now, of course, we don't have 50 million years to work, So they may need to fiddle with the process a little bit, to kind of speed things up a little bit, to replicate that kind of variety that would naturally come about over an extended period of time. Okay? So as I understand what they're doing, they are recreating the natural conditions, true, in a laboratory, but they're recreating the natural conditions that bring about a natural phenomenon. It's like when, I remember as a kid in the science lab, they would recreate static electricity that is replicating what happens with lightning. Okay? You're recreating, in an artificial setting, the original natural conditions to bring about a natural phenomenon. That's what I understand what they're trying to do.
Bill, you have 1 minute to ask the question.
Okay, it's kind of a two-part question, and let's get back to scripture, I suppose. So, and again, it's kind of keeping on this theme of inference to the best explanation. But if indeed the Bible is divinely inspired, wouldn't you expect to find in it certain scientific facts that people didn't know at that time? Wouldn't you expect there to be some kind of revelation about how the sun is just a star, or that the earth goes around the sun, or that the cause of disease is microorganisms? Wouldn't you expect that information would be relayed? And putting aside just the scientific things as the second part, what about moral practices, right? Wouldn't you expect to find that the moral institutions and the moral practices that the people accepted at that time, but that we now recognize as being profoundly immoral, wouldn't you expect there to be some kind of correction of that? I mean, the thing that comes to mind is slavery, right? I mean, you know the Bible far better than I do. But as I understand it, there are no New Testament passages, or there are no passages that explicitly forbid slavery, and there are a few passages, like in Paul's letter to Timothy, where it seems that slavery is being explicitly endorsed. So, you know, you would think, it seems to me, that if this is indeed inspired by a just and morally perfect being, and he's trying to get the message across, along with commandments about how to worship him, would be included, thou shalt not own slaves. Why is it we don't find something like that in Scripture?
That's two questions, and they both deserve equal length answer, but I can't give them both equal length. About why the Bible doesn't tell us those kinds of scientific facts, I suppose it's because the Bible isn't intending to give us a comprehensive knowledge, or even any knowledge of science unrelated to its theme. All books have a subject that they're talking about, and the subject of the Bible is how man got into his present condition and what God has done to get man back to where he needs to be. Astronomy would not be an important issue in that discussion. I could say more, but I don't have time. On the matter of the moral issues, we often object to slavery because we're always thinking of what we call, historians call, Atlantic slavery. Kidnapping black people from their homes, bringing them over, abusing them, treating them like chattel, and so forth. All societies had slavery throughout history. That doesn't make it right. But in biblical times, many people would actually sell themselves into slavery because they couldn't pay their debts. And it was a more secure economic circumstance. And the Bible told people who owned slaves to treat them justly, to not abuse them. And in fact, all the instructions concerning slavery have to do with that, about treating your slaves mercifully. The idea of human rights and no one should be owned by anyone else is an ultra-modern idea that we like it. We're raised with it. Talked about holding to a belief system because we're raised with it. The idea of human rights certainly does not come out of evolution. An atheistic idea of evolution can't tell you anything about human rights because humans are just the next animal up. The next species better than us can gobble us up with impunity. Actually, I don't really see how evolution without God can pronounce any moral outrage against anything, since evolution is caused by the strong preying upon the weak. If human beings who are strong prey upon the weak, that's just, who's to say it's immoral? That's how we got here, according to evolution. That's how our ancestors brought us here, and it may be the way that we're bringing on the next better species. Morality is entirely arbitrary to the atheist, it seems to me. It may be utilitarian, but it isn't really moral in the sense of people ought not to do such a thing just because it's wrong. We might say people ought not to do such a thing because it's unpleasant to other people. But a person who doesn't believe in God says, well, what the heck do I care what's unpleasant to other people? This is survival of the fittest here. This is natural selection. I'm stronger than you. I can enslave you. I can kill you. I can steal from you. I can sleep with your wife. Who can say I shouldn't? Isn't that how our ancestors brought us here?
Fine.